everybody. Welcome to the Dolphin Bandits. That is me, Oren Phillips, and it is the Wednesday episode, and it is a great episode. Why? Well, it's always a great episode for us, but today is even better because we have Todd Dezago on. Todd is a phenomenal writer. He's been doing things for Spider-Man, co-founder of Young Justice, his own project, Tellos, which is absolutely incredible. We talk about all that and more. He has some really wonderful tales, and I think you're going to really love this interview. Plus, he and I have a very good mutual friend, Walt. So, Walt, this one's dedicated to you, my buddy, and I think you're all gonna love it too. So, without further ado, here is Todd. We'll be talking to Mr. Todd Dezago. Todd, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to be here.
So, let's start at the very beginning. How do you first discover comics?
How did I discover comics? I think that I always had comic strips, the newspaper comic strips, and of course, cartoons. And I was a frustrated artist, or I was an artist, always noodling and doodling and trying to draw cartoons and things. But comic books, I think, they were at the barber shop. They were, in different places that I would frequent, but they weren't anything that I had my eye on until kind of later in life. I think I was 11, 12 when I started hanging around with a friend named Garth, who had just a stack of comics. And I'm on the radio, so I'm making arm gestures. He probably had a stack of comics in the corner of his room that was about 2 feet high, and next to it was another one that was a little smaller. But he was very generous, and I took to them, mostly Justice League, The Flash, Batman, Green Lantern, and I just loved them. And he would let me borrow them and take them home. And so I was just borrowing them and showing up the next day for another 5 or 6. Can I take them home? Can I read them? And that triggered in me a realization that you need to start buying these. You need to start getting them. And I did. I was mostly a DC boy to start out with. And of course, as we all know, that kind of expands. You look over and say, well, what is this? And it was, some Spider-Man. Of course, I knew who Spider-Man was and the other heroes. But you're just you're at that point where everything is just starting to blossom and everything is starting to unfold. And what a magical time in anybody's life.
So, how does the decision come to maybe pursue a career in the industry?
I think that it was always a dream, like, oh, I wish I could do this. I certainly wanted to become an artist. My heroes, growing up were Neil Adams and Jim Aparo, Mike Grell. And I dreamed of being an artist. So when I went off to college, I said, I'm going to go to art school. And I pursued a career in graphic arts for about a semester. And I was suddenly seduced by the theater department and realized that more powerful in me was this desire to be an actor, to be doing, productions and being involved in that. And I kind of let the artwork become the side gig, the side hustle. I would still draw and paint and do all kinds of things, but theater became my focus. And so the idea of getting into comics kind of took a backseat to, can I act? Can I be involved in movies or TV or theater?
So, when is the first step you made to reach out to try to get into the industry?
I went to college and studied theater with Scott Lobdell, who was he was following his path, his dream of getting in at Marvel. He was mostly hanging out at Marvel, and he, it sounds like it would be he got my foot in the door, and he certainly did. But I was trying to do it on my own. I didn't want to ride anybody's coattails. I was very proud, I guess. And so while he was working at Marvel, I was sending all my pitches and solicits to editors at DC. I had tons of Batman ideas, things that I wanted to do, all these dreams of, eventually one day writing some Justice League, or at the time, Teen Titans was one of my favorite groups. So So I really pitched a lot of stuff there. And then arbitrarily, I went to visit Scott and he said, come on, we're going to go into the city, and walked me right into the offices at Marvel. And I met a couple of the editors, and I think I charmed a few of them. And one of them was Kelly Corvese, who was on the some X-Men books. He had been there for a while, and he kind of nurtured me and said, yeah, why don't you write an inventory story? Which, for people who don't know, is a story that they would just have on hand in case the writer was late or the artist was late for an issue. This would be kind of a one and done story that they could throw in there in case they got behind schedule. So I started writing this inventory story when, out of nowhere, J.M. DeMatteis decided he was going to leave X Factor. And I knew him from I worked, Walt and I, our good friend Walt Curley, and I worked at a comic book store where a lot of the local artists and writers would come in. So I kind of knew J.M. a little bit, and he highly recommended me based on nothing, just a familiar face, I guess. And he and Kelly kind of nurtured me through the first couple of issues of X Factor, and I was off to the races. So it was really wacky.
I say, when that happens, are you sort of asked to follow, the way he's been doing things, or were you told, you know what, put your own spin on how you think the story should go?
I can tell you that, and enough time has passed, I think it would be okay to say this. JM had said, look, I've started this story that said you're gonna come on like the last leg of this 3-part subplot where Lorna Dane and Alex Summers got married. So Havoc and Polaris got married. They were honeymooning in Hawaii. So I needed to maintain that because JM had just gotten married too, and he had written off his honeymoon to say that it was a for the job, because that's the kind of cool things us writers can do. So he said, just as long as you keep him in Hawaii for another issue, I think that'll work. So that was kind of our inside joke. And mostly, the X offices were at that time really starting to make everything work together. So you were kind of on, you would have to do a couple of fill-in issue or a couple of issues in your book, and then have to jump online with a crossover or jump online with an event that was happening throughout Marvel. So there was a lot going on. And at the time I was, so eager. I couldn't believe that I had gotten a job. Honestly, there's still moments where it's surreal to me now that I've worked in comics. I go, did that really happen to me? So all of you out there saying, you're lucky bastard. Sorry, can I say bastard?
Go for it.
Bleep it. That I was so lucky. Yes, I was. I was somehow in the right place at the right time. And fortunately, I must have done something good in a former life because I was able to do that. But it was honestly, for the first couple issues, I still thought Marvel was pranking me, and they were just printing out, like probably 20 issues and putting them in the comic shops nearby so I could go see them and go, yeah, I'm doing it. I really didn't believe it. So for a while they were doing that. They were getting ready to do another crossover that I was going to be involved in. And being a brand new writer, the X offices were not so eager to share or to invite me in to be part of the planning.
Okay.
But meanwhile, down the hall in the Spider-Man offices, they had taken an interest in my writing, and they invited me to come down and be part of a brand new event that they were planning called the Clone Saga, which was only meant to take 2 months. Supposed to take 2 months. It took 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And we fought our way out of that. It's kind of legendary, but it was an interesting time to be involved in comics and involved in Spider-Man. And yet I really cut my teeth learning a lot of lessons on that big galumphing what we thought was a blight on Spider-Man's mythos, and now people look back on it with nothing but love and fondness. So time heals all wounds, I guess.
I want to ask a little bit more about Spider-Man, but first, as a writer, um, when you come up with an idea, do you have an endpoint in mind already, or do you want to start it and then see kind of where it goes to a conclusion?
That's a really great question. um, in my life before comics, I would write all these short stories and I would never be able to finish them. I would always think, oh, I could do a little bit better. I can do a little bit more. I have about 12 short stories now that I need to pull the trigger on and say they're done. I have a couple friends who are very, very angry with me for not finishing. So I never put a V end on any story until Marvel paid me to do it. So what I learned was you only have 22 pages. At the time, it was 22 pages to tell your story. So you really did need to plan ahead and plan it all out. You couldn't be you couldn't let yourself just wander. I've tried that a couple times with the Perhapanauts that I do now with Craig Rousseau, where I've allowed the characters to just tell me what they're going to do and have faith in myself that I will be able to wrap it all up. And so that's been interesting. It's been a game. When I write prose or when I'm writing a short story or something like that, I do allow myself to not know what the end is. But in comics, you really do, because you need to pitch it to your editor. You need to say, here's my outline, whether the story is going to be a 1-issue story or a 3-issue or a 5-issue story. Here is my outline. Here's the way that I see this story unfolding. And depending on the editor, they either give you the green light, or they want to chat about it a little bit, or they need a little clarification on certain things, which is great. It's a good way to have that back and forth, and with a very open and receptive editor, and in some cases a very creative editor, you can, the story can grow between you a little bit. You can have some things happen. I had a great relationship with Kelly Corvese on the X Factor books for what we were allowed to do, and at Marvel, Ralph Macchio, just a phenomenal editor who would look at something and say, hey, I really like this. What if we juxtapose these two scenes? What if we switch these two scenes? What could you get out of it emotionally if you did that? And honestly, it would be like a light bulb going off. And I go, oh, hey, that's a cool idea, Ralph. And it would open up the floor to new conversations and things. He was really still is just a really great editor, a great story guy, really sees the story for everything it is and everything it could be.
When you make the jump to Spider-Man, are you putting pressure on yourself because that's, a franchise cornerstone character? Or have you had enough confidence from what you've done before that, what, I could get into this and I can do this job?
I feel like I say this every time I talk about my coming into comics, is I was really fortunate because on the other 3 Spider-Man books at the time were J.M. DeMatteis, Tom DeFalco, and Howard Mackie, who really kind of became my mentors. They kind of took me under their wings, their respective wings, and they became my big brothers. And we were on that project for so long, and we developed kind of a writer speak for it, because all 4 of us were frustrated that they weren't letting us end this story. So we just had to keep talking. So we would talk separately, then we would get on with the editors and talk again for hours. And it just seemed like it was never going to end, but we became brothers in arms. We were in the war together. And to this day, we, the three or four of us, will look at each other like, man, that was some time. So I was lucky in that I had my 3 wise men looking over my shoulder and kind of giving me some guidance and pointing me in directions, and giving me some insight into the way the business worked. Howard especially, would say, be careful of this person or that person because they'll take your idea. Don't talk to this person because they'll steal your idea. Don't talk to, when he gave me some really good advice about one of the editors was, look, give it to him as black and white as you can, because that's the way he's seeing it. Then you can play around with the little details. You can add in, just give this person these bullet points
Right.
and leave it at that. So that was great. That was, phenomenal. So you need to learn your editors too.
Right. I've spoken to the gentleman you just mentioned, along with Terry Cavanaugh and stuff, about the Clone Saga and how there were so many cooks in the kitchen, and folks who had nothing to do with comics would come in and say, "Well, this is selling well. We want to do something and go from there." Was there a frustration on your part to, like, you know what, this is not the best story I'm putting out because we have to drag this thing on? Like, it must have been very difficult to try to keep pushing and trying to recreate the wheel.
This is back in the day where you, on your phone, you could we would be having these conversations that would go on for hours and hours with the editorial staff, and they would be all on a speakerphone in some room, and there were 6 or 7 people there. Sometimes someone from marketing was there too, and that was frustrating as hell.
Yeah.
But Tom and Howard and I specifically would be on these calls. And have you ever held the phone to your ear so long that your ear starts to burn, like it hurts? And we would hook flash each other. So you would have another line on your phone, and you could hit that flash and dial one of the other guys, and they would get a beep that no one else would hear. And so I could have these conversations on the side with Tom or Howard and go, and it would be, oh my God, I can't believe these guys aren't letting us do this, or will they please let us finish? So yes, we were, the 3 of us especially, because we were the 3 that kind of stuck with it all the way through. Jim DeMatteis had left the books for a while because they were unruly. Right. And there was no end in sight. And so, yes, it was very frustrating. And we really tried to support each other. We would vent to each other in these, I can't believe it, little side conversations. Or we would hook flash each other and say, listen, I got to go to the restroom. Don't, just cover for me. Yeah. Or Howard's daughters were both getting off on the school bus, and he had to go meet the school bus. And he'd go, I'm going to pick up the girls, cover for me. Yeah. And so there was a lot of that going on too. So we tried to fight the machine a little bit, but it was very frustrating, the story, and it was the marketing people who were saying, drag it out. It's really, the sales are great. And the sales were terrific. Right. But as a new guy, I was also trying to, and the low man on the totem pole, I was trying to offer my ideas, but I was also kind of overpowered by these 3 guys who had been in the business for a long time before. So I would, on the side, say to them, I need some help getting my voice heard, because you 3 are, and what was beautiful was JM, his name is Mark. we call him Mark. I like to respect him, but sorry, Mark. So Mark, of course, had these ideas, and he would pitch them, and then Howard would get up and he'd have some ideas, and they would be coming from a different place, and I would have some ideas, and Tom would have some. But the beautiful thing about Tom DeFalco, I will say this all day, all the time, is Tom would be the guy to kind of sit back and say, here's how we do all of that. Here's how we tell our story so that all these ideas can be used. And he did make sure to bring in my ideas and include them, and gave them more power. So I did feel a little bit overwhelmed in the beginning, trying to get my thoughts across. And fortunately, these guys recognized that in time also. I was able to appeal to them individually, and they helped me out to make that work.
What did you want to go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what did you want to bring to Spider-Man that you thought maybe wasn't there before as a character? What kind of influence did you want to put on him, either as Peter Parker or as Spider-Man himself?
I think my belief, my reading, my training, whatever you want to say, or the stories that I liked always were about the character, were always about the people. And so I was always, in my mind, I'm always thinking about emotional moments and emotional beats for the character to grow or to realize something or to connect with another character and to make that happen. So as far as what I could do in the Clone Saga, it was mostly trying to examine the relationships of the people, the cast that we knew, Peter and Mary Jane and Jonah and Aunt May and whoever else, and to show how they would respond and react and interact with all this going on around them. What I wanted to bring to Spider-Man is pretty much what I did bring when Mike Wieringo and I took over Sensational Spider-Man, because we were looking at, I go all the way back to The Dark Knight, which was 1987, 86, 87. The Dark Knight really changed comics, and the ripple effect happened overnight. It happened everywhere. Things got dark, things got serious, things became so much more grim and mature. And when Mike Wieringo and I first met and chatted on the phone about the kind of Spider-Man we wanted to do together, it was to bring back some of that playfulness and fun, some of the coincidence and whimsy that were in the comics we read as a kid. So we were kind of aiming towards more of a Marvel team-up Spider-Man, more of a fun, where we weren't focusing so much on the day-to-day life of being Spider-Man as much as how would someone have fun if he had these powers? And to bring back some of the characters that we thought were kind of a little ridiculous and try to give them a little, you know, validation in the late 90s, early 2000s. We wanted to play with the toys and have fun with them, really. And that's ultimately what we did.
I would say, and that's such an important thing because I understand that, that, like you said, Dark Knight changed everything. Characters got a lot darker and this and that. But at the end of the day, these books are supposed to be fun. You're not supposed to put it down and feel like, the weight of the world's on your shoulders. You're supposed to put it down and be like, that was a good adventure. I can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah. That was, that there was escapism that, a lot of people will say that that's what drew them to comics. It was just these worlds and these places that you could go and imagine yourself. Which hero would you be? What powers would you want to have? What do you want to do? And with The Dark Knight, which I loved, and I don't want to sound like I'm denigrating it in any way, I loved it. And I loved the darker, grimmer stories, but it seemed to totally eliminate any of that fun and the playfulness that you're talking about. So yeah, we really wanted to maybe bring some of that back, and we did get we got a lot of letters,
Yeah.
And as we were doing as we were wrapping up the Clone Saga, Mike and I had already started our little adventures with Spider-Man and done some things, and we were getting a lot of really positive mail, which made people at Marvel start to recognize maybe we do need to let ourselves be a little silly once in a while. So it happened, and now you have Jeff the Shark. So
You mentioned him, of course,
good
and
stuff.
the late great Mike. All accounts, a wonderful guy. What was your guys' working relationship like? Were you guys, bouncing ideas off of each other?
He wanted to be involved in the very beginning. I just was speaking about this a little while ago. When Mike and I talked, we had a phone conversation that lasted about 4 hours. I had called him up because I was just going to be doing a fill-in because Mark Waid was going to come and write the book, and he and Mike were going to be the new team. And so Ralph Macchio asked me if I would fill in. And I said, sure, give me Mike's number. I want him, if this is just a fill in, I want to talk to him and find out what he'd like to draw. And when I called him up and asked him what he'd like to draw, he said, is this a joke? No one ever asks me what I want to do. I said, no, wouldn't it be more fun if you were drawing something you liked? What villain would you like to do? What should we do? And that conversation just opened it up. He'd like to be involved in choosing and guiding the direction. From there, and then we did Spider-Man. We did an X-Men 1/2 that was published by Marvel and Wizard magazine that did pretty well. And we did our own comic book Tellos for years. And the working relationship was, I would tell him the story, he would give me feedback, we go back and forth. But when I wrote him the plot for him to draw, I would try to surprise him. And in giving me the art back, he would kind of surprise me with different camera angles or something. We were both trying to challenge each other to do the best we could. And I like to think that it was certainly fun. It was a great relationship. It was fantastic. And we were really great friends. So we enjoyed a lot of the same stuff. And yeah, it was a horrible loss.
Yes,
but yeah.
But out of this friendship and relationship came Tellos. And for you,
Yes.
what was it like to be able to have, no barricades, no barriers on you? You could do as you like because it's your own world, it's your own creation. You don't have to worry about, things that happened in the past or other books that are going on.
It was very, very exciting. It was a little I almost said daunting, but it wasn't daunting. We were both very, very excited, and we banged around so many ideas before we landed on exactly what Tellos was going to be. Mike was very interested in and influenced by anime, all the anime that was coming out in the early to late 90s, Akira, and I don't remember them all, but he would buy them and send them to me on VHS. That's how long ago this was. He would send them to me for birthday presents, Christmas presents, or just to have, you need to have this or look at this. So our first swing was going to be a very big, epic, kind of darker story called Dark Sands. And we developed that for probably 2 months before we both went, this is darker than we want it to be. And it's got a lot of magic. And we were trying to create rules for the magic, because anybody who writes a story that has magic, you really need to establish what are the guidelines of this magic you are using. And we weren't happy with it. And so on a whim, we both knew that we loved animals. We wanted to have, anthropomorphic characters, animals that were part of our cast. And so I think I threw out a couple ideas that we were going to have a tiger and originally I said a possum, but he turned out to be Rick the Fox later on, because trying to find good reference pictures of possums where they don't look like they want to eat your face. Mike was drawing all these possums that weren't really coming out. But we did want to have dragons and magic and all the things that were part of the fantasy world that we grew up imagining. And Tellos grew out of it, and it became a lot more fun and whimsical initially than we originally were going with that Dark Sand stuff.
When you look at, there's been so many different books that have come out for it. Where you started with the story to where it is right now, is it anywhere close to what you had in mind, or did it take so many different directions it just became its own thing?
No, we kind of, again, Mike and I were always talking, so it was where things were happening. The original run of Tellos, the original story arc of the first Tellos was supposed to be 15 issues. Mm. And somewhere around issue 6, I think issue 5 or 6, was when the industry crashed. and our sales on issues 1, 2, and 3, and even 4 were really great. And we thought we can make a living. We could do this. And then suddenly the drop in sales all across the board in comics made us realize, we might be in trouble here, because it's not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to afford to keep doing this. So issue 5 or 6, we needed to kind of regroup. And so the story that ended up being 10 issues instead of 15, I needed to truncate. So yes, that wasn't exactly everything that we were going to do, but our dreams of what we wanted to do beyond that are kind of what I put into the Mike Wieringo Tellos tribute, which I did in 2017 with over 250 artists all told. A lot of people came in. It was all done, for with the idea that no one was going to make money on this, that we were going to donate all the money to the ASPCA in Mike's name, because he and I had donated money from the first Tellos issue to them. And so everybody came in and did several pages and put so much work into it. I can't talk about it without mentioning Val Staples was the production and color coordinator. Tom Zoller was my lettering god, took care of getting all these letters to do things. So those two guys, I couldn't have done it without anybody, but those two put in much more. They won't talk to me now. They hate me, but the story that unfolded there, a lot of the beats and the things that Mike and I had dreamed of doing, that there would be a big war, that Kodge, the tiger character, would gain some magical powers, that things would shift and change for the characters. So it did become kind of what I'm in talks now with Mad Cave to possibly bring Tellos back. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Well, I said it. So maybe we'll have more Tellos. I have stories that go on. I have stories in my head that go on forever. I always say I could write Spider-Man and Tellos in my sleep. Hopefully they wouldn't look like I wrote them in my sleep, but those are characters that I can write every day, 24/7. They just come very easily. Perhapanauts is the same way. I can, because they're my characters, I can write them too.
Without any, with all due
Trying
respect.
to think.
Hmm?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry about that.
I would say, with all due respect to the folks you've worked with in the past and the future and all that stuff, but was working with Mike the most symbiotic relationship you had, where the two of you were it just clicked? Like, what you wrote, he could draw, and it just worked so well.
It was, as a frustrated artist myself, I remember my mom looking at it. It's very funny what Mike's and my parents said was very interesting, because they came at it from different places. My mom tell us, "Oh, this looks like what you wish you could draw." Wow. And she wasn't saying it in a derogatory way. Yeah. She would watch me. My mom and I were very close. She passed away, almost 20 years ago. We were very close, and she would see me as a young, sensitive artist trying desperately to please myself, and I would work on something for hours and then rip it up. And I'm sure there's lots of artists out there that can identify, because you want it to be a certain way and you just can't get it. And my mom would see it and say, "That's beautiful." And I'd crumple it up and throw it away. And she knew what I was looking for. And so that kind of comment was great. It was really funny that Mike's father, who knew that Mike was very creative and had stories in his head, before he met me, Cecil, said, "I don't know what you need Todd for." And then when Cecil and I met the day after Mike died, we were all sitting and talking, Mike's brother and sister-in-law, Mike's mom and dad, and me. We were sitting around, and after I had been talking for a while, Cecil said, see now how it is. I get it now. Tellos wouldn't be Tellos without you. And so it was interesting that he didn't understand what I did until he met me, what I brought to the story. And so yeah, Mike and I very symbiotic. Craig Rousseau and I on Perhapanauts, we have a different relationship, but we also work in a very close way. He doesn't need to be as involved in I tell him what we're going to do, but he doesn't need to be involved in the creation, in the what am I trying to say? In the concept.
Okay.
But then when I give him ideas of what I'm looking for, what I'm seeing, he almost always does either what I'm dreaming in my head or takes it someplace where I go, oh, I never thought of that. That's a great camera angle, or that's a great way to show this scene.
Right.
So I enjoy that. I'm working on another project with an artist named Eric Henson, who does mostly known, I think, for covers for Coffin Comics. He's done some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles work and things. He and I are working on a very graphic horror crime story. So it's totally out of what people expect from me. Right. I think I was typecast. I know I was typecast as the lighthearted fun guy. And all these years I've been saying, I write horror stories too. So this book will probably be out sometime next year. It's called Unmade, and it is horrific. I mean, it's really graphic, and Eric is doing some phenomenal work on the art with that. And if I'm allowed to keep pitching, I'm also working on a graphic novel about growing up here in my small town, kind of a combination of Stand By Me and Stranger Things story that's being drawn by my friend John Burgeon, who has a style that's very cartoony. I want to say Mad Magazine, just wonderful fun. It fits the genre and the period so perfectly. And he and I are having a lot of fun. So I guess I drew that answer out. Oh,
not at all.
Sorry.
Well, that brings me to a question here, because you have these projects going on. How do you kind of put blinders on yourself to say, like, you know what, today I'm focusing on this project, and not be like, oh, but you know what would be cool if I did this for this, and just focus on one thing at a time? How do you sort of give yourself that discipline?
You're a writer, right? So I can tell where this question is coming from. No, I am not good at it. I am. I don't know if any of the listeners will be old enough to remember the Ed Sullivan Show, or the guy who would come out with the plates on the poles. Have you ever seen the old TV shows where they spin all these plates and they got to keep running from one plate to the other to keep them spinning on the poles? And that was entertainment, folks. That was a suspenseful act. Well, I'm that guy. I'm running around trying to make sure I've got Perhapanauts going over here, and Unmade going over here, and my podcast going over here. And then, oh, John needs some pages for our Warren Street Boys story. And it's there's a lot going on. So I'm not good at it. I would like to be able to have a week where I could catch up on everything and make sure that I'm ahead of everyone. But for example, Eric needs some pages of Unmade. That's what I'm going to be doing as soon as we get done, is giving him a few more pages so he has things to do over the next couple of weeks, and I can not worry about him, and then go on to the next plate.
We have to talk a little bit about Young Justice. Who did DC come to you and say, hey, do you have any ideas that you like to do? Or did you go to them and say, this is something I've been working on?
They came to me. I was and again, I think I was typecast as the who can write kids well. And whether it was because I am just a big kid myself, or I can still access that voice. You're working with children every day, so you probably get some good little kid thoughts that come in, and you go, oh, that's the way they think about that. Okay. But I was writing kids well. I was writing lighthearted stuff. They wanted to relaunch, create a new Teen Titans. The older Teen Titans, the Marv Wolfman, George Perez Teen Titans were already going great guns. They'd already been around for almost 20 years by that point. And they came to me and said, would you like to write a new Teen Titans that has Superboy, Impulse, and Robin? And I said, absolutely. And so we wrote World Without Grownups, which was that was my pitch of what I wanted to do. We had to get it past Grant Morrison and the Justice League editors, because in an interview, I guess Grant said he had an idea to use the sidekicks as an extra Justice League in a story. So we needed to get his approval, and he said, go do whatever you want to do. He said it with a British accent, and I honestly couldn't understand a word he said. If it's known. Mark Miller was there with us translating for me at that big, we had a big lunch. It was a big conference. But anyway, I pitched the story of what I wanted to do, and everybody liked it. The Batman offices signed off and said Robin could do those things. And then with that, they said, would you like to create a new, we were calling it Justice League Junior at the time, which I thought was a cool name, but they said, what are some other ideas for a name? And Young Justice was one of them, and probably not my favorite, but that's the one they, of course, went with and said, yeah, okay, we're going to call it Young Justice. And so I wrote up a plan for it, and it was, I wanted to give them, to show them my outline for the next year of what I would do on the book. And I turned out to go 16 issues instead of 12. And so I did a 16-issue overview of what each issue would be, and the little outline for it, a little blurb, like a solicitation. And then the editor came back to me and said, the Batman offices won't let you do all these things with Robin. Some of them are too silly. Some of them are too whimsical. They were going to be shrinking down and going into on an adventure with the Atom. They were going to be like you saw some of the covers from the Justice League in the 60s and 70s. They were all going to get animal heads. They were all going to, there's going to be a lot of magic involved and a lot of coincidence and wacky stuff. And so I went and I rewrote the 16-issue overview again, and had to do new stories that were more serious, because Robin at the time was being treated, anything in the Batman universe was very serious. And then when Denny O'Neil saw what I did, how I treated the Batman-Robin relationship in World Without Grownups, he said, let Todd do whatever he wants, which was great, but they didn't tell me that. The editor decided he just wanted to do the more serious stories. So he never gave me the option, and I was not as happy with it. But when I found that out, it was like strike three on the number of things that he had lied to me about. So I jumped ship. I called up Todd Nauck, who I had to work for months to convince them that Todd Nauck was the guy that we wanted for it. I told Todd this on the side too. They were not sure. They just could not commit. The editor and the editor-in-chief at the time could not commit to him. And I said, wait a minute. And so I had Todd do fill-in issues on Spider-Man. He did 2 fill-in issues just so I could show them, look, he's fantastic. He's great. We can do this. And they were still like, well, we'll see. So when it came right down to it, I was so frustrated with the editor, who was misleading me at every turn. I didn't trust him, and I didn't want to work with him anymore. So I left the project. So that's why I didn't do Young Justice.
I say, is it, does it sour you about the industry when things like that happen, or do you just have to
I think I just said, well, there's not, sometimes there's not good people in the right positions. Right. Sometimes you run into people who don't have the ability to see what you're trying to do. There's editors that will kind of edit for editing's sake and you have to explain to them why you're having this happen in the story. I don't mind an editor who can tell me, I don't want this for this reason. But if they don't want to do something in the story just so that they can flex their editorial muscle and say they did something, and that's I think in my whole career, 30 years in the business, I've had two people who have done that, and I've had to say, hey, this is why I want to do it. And in some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't, and in some cases I feel the story suffered, and in other cases I was able to come up with something else that they would agree to. But it didn't sour me on the industry. I love comics. I think most of the people who are involved in comics grew up with comics, so they're usually friendly, nice people. Usually, Tom Rainey said to me one day, "Well, we all grew up with comics, so we're all trying to do the right thing." And that's a pretty good summation of the people that I've met in this industry and the people who love comics. We all want to do the right thing.
You mentioned before about sort of being typecast for writing, for younger audiences. For you, what's the key to doing that? Because you don't want to go over heads, but you also don't want to talk down to your audience. How did you sort of find that middle ground that made it so successful to reach readers?
I don't know. I, as you were saying that, I started to formulate an answer. In 2010, Marvel came to me to do a comic book based on the Superhero Squad cartoon show,
Okay.
which was, and they made little. I don't know if you remember seeing the little Marvel superhero squaddies. They were little toys, collectible action figures that all the kids I knew had.
Right.
But for a year and a couple months, I wrote this story that was really geared for kids that were 7 to 12 years old, maybe something like that, whatever that age range is. And I always called it playground humor. And at the time, I had my niece and nephew who were of that age. So I would talk to them and try to find. So each time I was writing that, I was writing each issue for them. And to try to make them laugh. What is going to make them enjoy this? And I broke the 22 pages into two 11-page stories. And again, they were just silly cartoon stories. But I would go to conventions and parents would come up to me and say, perfect bedtime story length. That 11 pages was great. Tomorrow night, you can read the other half of the book. We'll do that. They were reading it to their kids. Right. And it meant a lot to me that they were being embraced that way. As far as your question about the fun or the lightheartedness, I think I'm trying to recapture what I loved as a kid. I know that that's part of what Mike Wieringo and I talked about initially is I'd like to be able to appeal to young readers in the same way that I was when I was 12 and 13 and 14. I'd like them to see a place where they can go and find hope and people doing good things, positive role models. I'd like to see, I hope that I can write stories that have some suspense in them and emotion, as I said, a sensitive moment or something. So that's what I'm shooting for.
You're also now a podcaster, Random
Yeah.
Acts Comics. How has that been, and what started that?
I have been friends as I came into the comic book industry and going to conventions. I started meeting and making friends with a lot of people that I consider legends, people that I grew up with who entertained me as a kid. Nick Cardy, Ramona Fradon, Joe Sinnott, Bernie Wrightson, Jim Starlin, all these people that to me were just untouchable. And yet Starlin and Wrightson and I were playing volleyball with Terry Austin and Ron Mars and Fred Hembeck and a whole gang. And as time went on, especially especially with Nick Cardy, we were very close. He was like an uncle to me, and he passed away 9 years ago. It's all out of the loop, but I wish that I could have had the podcast then so that people could hear his voice and hear his stories and hear his reminiscence about being an artist in the 60s, 50s, and 60s and 70s. His war stories, the things that he would tell me, they were great. Ramona Fraden, who just passed away this time last year, she and I were very close, and I would take her to lunch and we would have a couple of drinks with our lunches. And she would tell me all kinds of stories and great. And I thought, I need to get a podcast going so that I can get Ramona on, and a lot of my friends too, people that I'm very close with, as well as fans that I've met over the years. Of course, I grew up with Walt, our friend Bill Curley, but just to him telling stories about working in the comic shop, about people who have found comics in different ways. My friend Shane Simic is a cop who really feels that he is carrying out the same values that he learned from comics. And then, of course, I had Walter and Wheezy Simonson on. And the beauty of that was they were in the studio. They're really dear friends of mine. And Walter was on one end of the couch, Wheezy was on the other. So during each of their respective interview, the other one was calling in shots from the side. So you were getting this dynamic you wouldn't normally get. Joe Staten and his wife Hillary were also in like that. And just people that have become a family to me. I really wanted to have a chance to show people their personal sides, not just the side that you see from their work or just what you see from little stories you might hear from Walter, especially. Walter will talk until your ears fall off. People love hearing his stories, but I wanted to have him talk about some of the stories he's told me over the years that he doesn't initially automatically to. Yeah. Another person that I missed, Starlin was on the show, but Bernie passed away a few years ago, and we were volleyball pals, and we were good friends. And what a sweet, sweet, sensitive man. But anybody who looks at his artwork is going to go, wow, this is a twisted, dark person. And he wasn't. He loved the macabre. He loved Swamp Thing. He loved Frankenstein. He loved that dark, scary, EC comic stuff. And that's what he wanted to draw. But what a sweet, sweet man that guy was. Just great. I wish I could have had him on.
I think what you're saying is so important. It's to capture history. It's to keep these stories out there. So, when folks go back and say, oh, this person did this and that, all the information is right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and again, there's certain stories that they don't like. Years ago, Howard Mackey told me a great story about Jim Starlin, and I asked Jim Starlin about it. He said, I don't want to talk about that. So, it's some stories aren't going to come out, but the stories that people do have are some of them are just great, and they don't realize that they're very special stories. Walter's taught me so much about art, just having a conversation with him, just over dinner. He'll mention a couple things about an artist or about a piece of artwork, and I'll go home and look it up, and suddenly I'm down a rabbit hole. And that's all because he just mentioned this artist. It's great stuff.
You mentioned art, and I was thinking you started out wanting to be an artist and became a writer and stuff. Does that itch ever get to you to say, hey, how about I pencil a book? Hey, how about you guys give me a script and I'll take a crack at it?
No, I don't think my style. I do my Christmas card every year that features my dog and my cat or previous pets. For years I've been doing it, and my style has always been like children's book style, not like a comic book style. I've done a couple times. I just did a cover. I sat down to do a variant cover for Craig's and my latest Perhapanauts joint, and it came out horrible. And Craig was being very nice, and our good friend Rich Woodall, both of them saw it and they went, "Oh yeah, that's nice. Maybe we can dress it up with the cool fonts or something." But it was horrible, and ultimately I said, you know what, let's not do that. Other days I'll sit down and I'll draw or doodle something or design a little something, and I'll go, oh yeah, I think my real contribution now is that I am a frustrated artist. I do visualize everything I write. So I have an idea of how the layout of the page will go, where the characters will go. I have been, and as I said, Craig and I have developed such a great symbiotic relationship that I will send him my stick figure layouts of stuff, and he, some things he looks at and goes, no, that's not the way I'm going to do it. But in a lot of cases, it informs him how the story could unfold. And we've gotten it to a point now where we really don't change that much. We're just doing like a little 8-page story that's going to appear in our next trade. In each of the trades that we're reprinting now, we're trying to put a little new, something new, new material. So in the latest one that we have a story that I laid out, and Craig is just really taking it straight from my layouts and going with that. So I am still dreaming. I'm still visualizing it. I just can't carry it out to make it look good so that people would actually pay money for it.
I have one last question. It's a very loaded one, but what's Todd at his best? If you had to look at someone to ask you what you did for a living, if there's a project or something you worked on that you say, this was me firing on all cylinders, what would that be?
Wow. I guess right now it's Tellos. It's still the first that first story arc of Tellos is it's special. I think that it was Mike and I really hitting that stride of being connected, of really working together. The synergy or the creative collaborative process was just so very tight. I'm very proud of that, and I think that would be the thing that I would say. Here's a nice copy of it. Mike's artwork, of course, is gorgeous. So if people fall in love with that, I'm fine if they don't like the story. but that I am very proud of the Perhapanauts too. So it's tough. It's tough to figure out which one of your babies you love the most.
Yeah.
But I think that would be it. And I'm hoping that maybe some of these other projects will also shine brightly. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Sounds good. How could fans find you, see what you are up to, follow your podcast? What's the best way to fans to look out for you?
The podcast, I try to keep up on Instagram to let people know what's going on with the podcast. It's also, I have a Facebook page under Todd Dezago. There's a Perhapanauts page that we check out once in a while. randomactsofcomics.com. Oh, wait, is that the website? That's the website. Where you can go. You can find Random Acts of Comics, just like your podcast, on most of the platforms. It's out there all over the place. I didn't even know where it was. Some people said, oh, I listened to you on this or that, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So it's out there. I do have still, like an old timer, I have a Facebook page, and people will drop me notes and things there. So we'll see. Whatever the next media circus is going to be, I'll probably be on that too.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, hey, thank you for taking the time to speak today, and B, thank you for all the work that you've done for us fans. You've taken on some magical rides.
Well, thank you very much, and it's great meeting you, Aaron. You're really an awesome podcaster.
And we're back. Todd is what a wonderful guy. What a nice guy to talk to. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. He has his own podcast too. We mentioned it during the interview, but just so we remember, it's called Random Acts of Comics. You can find it the same places you find our podcast. a lot of great guests. Really cool to hear, people in the industry talking to each other. They have a lot cooler insight because they're all on the same page. So again, we'd love to have Todd back because he is a wonderful storyteller and he has so much to talk about. So Todd, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you had a wonderful week. Hope your wives and your mothers and everyone had a wonderful Mother's Day. And we will see you next on Friday, actually. Bye.